Hey dude, how's it going?
Hey Scott, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you very much. Apart from, madness of 2020.
Uh, It's just
Such
coming
as
in
it.
waves now, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a good good word.
Yeah, I mean, like waves is mostly.
Good word to sum it all up. Oh, it's all good. Thank you so much for your time today to chat
All you
about the
do.
show. We enjoyed the show. Congratulations on it. You must be delighted with the response that the show has had so far.
Yeah, well, we're delighted that we got to do a second season of it. That was really our goal, was just to be able to do it again. We knew that was a possibility. The White Princess, the White Queen, they didn't get to do two. Not because there's just a story couldn't be told in two parts or didn't need to be, but ours always did need two parts. So if no one watched it, that never would have happened. So we're very, very grateful that we got to go back into our little bubble again and do it all again in quite a different way as well. But so we're very, very happy with the response that anyone
Yeah.
watched it.
How exciting is it for you as an actor to go back to a character again? Because and very rarely do you get to do such things. If you're lucky, you get to do it once. It
Yeah,
must be such a not just a great feeling, but also a good challenge in that you get to go back and do something different with the same person.
yeah. I feel like it really suited me
Excuse me.
because I can be, a little bit nervous around like new situations and new people. I'm not leading with confidence all the time. And coming back to a set that I was actually comfortable with and knowing lots of the crew, it just means you know everybody's name, you know the tone of the show. Because sometimes you do a show or a film and you think you're doing one kind of film, and then you watch it and you realize you were totally wrong about the tone entirely. Um, so I kind of knew what it was this season. Um, this isn't to say that I did better in it personally, but I certainly felt more comfortable going into it. And I played like a teenager who's like in love and um like he's in love with his brother's wife, and he's just trying to get like, out from under the shadow of his parents, and then I have to become like Henry VIII, the tyrannical despot. So I'm never going to be cast as Henry VIII, the tyrannical despot, if I hadn't been cast to play the teenager first. So I was very lucky to be cast in the first season and then have to transform quite a bit for the second one, and certainly to go through different circumstances. And yeah, I've never had that experience in my life. Have I done two seasons of other things? I have, but they were a continuation of the same character, maybe small differences, but nothing like this. And I'd be very surprised if I get the same opportunity again. So I'll always be grateful to Emma Matthew for that.
And obviously the character, steeped in history, and we know what happens and know where he goes. That must have been exciting to go back and given, as you say, that he kind of it's almost like playing a different character because he's
Yeah,
changed so
yeah,
much and he's on that trajectory to become the person that we know in history.
yeah. Well, it's very exciting to play that, and it'd be a bit daunting as well to, I don't know, to have that about face in a character, especially when people have gotten to know him in the first season. But luckily, all of that transformation essentially happens on screen at the start of the season. Two, things are going quite well for him. It's a continuation of the first season. Things are looking up. He's a well-loved king. He's popular. He has a son and a loving wife, and then everything gets taken away from him bit by bit. And then because of that emotional stress and fallout, I hope it's um, understandable why he might react the way he does. He needs to talk to a therapist, really. He needs to really talk with a professional, but he doesn't. And there's no psychiatry for maybe 400, 500 years after this point. And
Yeah.
it changes the course of history because of it. So it's, again, so my point being there that I get to have the experience of being changed and not have to just imagine, oh, these things have happened. It all happens on screen. We get to live it, and it's just easier if that happens, and the writing is as good as it is.
Yeah, it's strange because I wrote on my notes that he reminded the character and his kind of trajectory reminded me a little bit of Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars because
Oh
he's
yeah,
this, well, just in the sense that
that's
he's a guy
true.
who he has a family and he's going to have a family, and he has all these things, and then
Yeah,
slowly but surely it's taken away from him, and his response to it isn't the response that you
you're
would
right.
hope.
Yeah, that's such a
So
really,
it's
a
kind
really
of
good comparison.
yeah. I
Anakin
just wondered,
Skywalker.
is there anything yeah, was there anything in your kind of when you acted that do you draw any upon, not necessarily Star Wars or anything, but is there anything that you kind of drew upon, or was it just the history that kind of is your guide in that respect?
Yeah, so what I really struggle with is that he eventually starts killing quite indiscriminately amongst his own court and people that is he's formerly close with, kind of come under suspicion, and he has them killed. And I felt like that was a huge gauntlet to just get. I can't just decide I'm going to kill people. I have to justify it, you know. So I really had to. I just had to know that if same with Anakin Skywalker comparison that you have, that it's very high stakes, you know, that like Anakin has Padme die, and Henry knows that if he's deposed as king, and he might be if he doesn't have a son, then his whole court will be slaughtered, you know, and he sees the people around him hurting themselves, like his wife, by going into battle. That's really hurting the kingdom. It's not helping it. So he's seeing people around him like constantly hurt themselves, and he has to try and take control. And eventually it just it's easier to just take them out one by one.
Yeah. What was it in the initial? I mean, obviously, you know, you had the histories, as I said, about the context and stuff, but what drew you to him in the first instance, in the first series? Because obviously you say he's very different back then. I mean, did you see a kind of a guy that we didn't know and it was a little bit different, and there was a bit of a different story to be told before all the other stuff? Is that what kind of drew you to him?
Yeah, I would have been very nervous again if I was playing the Henry VIII from the outset, but getting to change into him was great. And just even in the first little reading about what he was like when he was younger, when he was 1 year old, he was put on a giant war steed horse and marched through the streets, and people cried because they felt he was such a relaxed baby, that he had such charisma, that he was much more so than his older brother, who was going to become king, was destined to become king. And he was just seen as this very charismatic, well-loved, relaxed prince. And I felt like I could probably that is a fun and interesting thing to play, and very far from where he ends up. So there was a chance to play a version of him that seemed to be true to life, but that hadn't been seen before, you know, the young Henry. And that's always going to be exciting to do that.
Yeah, and one of the things I like about the show is your relationship with Charlotte on the screen, because obviously there's quite, as you touched on before, the relationship has so many things happen in it in such a short space of time. You obviously need to have that trust with the actor that you're playing alongside. I just wondered how it was kind of grasping that with Charlotte, and whether you had kind of room to maneuver to kind of bring your own stuff to it as well as what was on the page.
Yeah, of course. I think the chemistry between us was really important. I did many chemistry tests with lots of possible Catherines, and over my auditions as well. And I think our chemistry and just how much we like each other was really palpable in those initial screen tests. And then over the first season, we were on this adventure. It was like our biggest job we'd ever worked at that stage. And we were living in Bristol, which is just beautiful. I'd love to live there again someday. And we were kind of just on this fairy tale adventure, and I felt like it mirrored the characters on screen. They were young and idealistic. And then by the time we came to season 2, you know, a year later, I don't know, there was a different sense to the world. Not that things were like that much darker, but I just felt like a bit more adult, and I'd been through a few more things and things that happened. And Charlotte also, you know, been through things that year. So it felt like the darkness that was about to erupt out of the page was there for us. And as we knew each other so well this season, we have this really, really deep connection to each other, because when you work so closely with someone and living, you know, in Bristol for a year together over the last 2 years, but we'd bicker as well, like an old married couple, you know. Like we just had a very natural relationship that has really evolved over time, like the characters on the page. And that really, really helps. You know, you're not trying to manufacture anything. And I guess even the weight of your own history between each other, I don't know. I think it always helps to imbue something on the screen as well. You're not strangers to each other, because these people aren't strangers to each other. You know, they know each other very intimately, and there's a certain sense that you get of that, you know, that's hard to fake.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this show's obviously been a huge success, and there's been other kind of historical TV shows like this that have been so successful. And we seem to be drawn to history, I think, more so now, because history always kind of repeats itself in many ways. Do you think that's why audiences are drawn to stories like these, that they can see, maybe not themselves, but they can see situations that are very similar to how they were back then, and that we're still talking about them in ways that maybe we shouldn't be?
Yeah, well, I wasn't a huge history buff in school or anything, but of course for this, I did a huge amount of research, and it was amazing to see just patterns that I've seen arise throughout my life come up. And you'd feel like you were so far from that point that they couldn't possibly be relevant. And I know that Emma and Matthew certainly see the similarities between Trump and Henry. And I actually, every time I heard that, I just kind of flush it out of my mind, because I don't know if it was helpful for me to play some kind of Trump-like character. And I'm not sure what the connections are there, but they certainly think there are. And so, of course, the historical similarities between our own times, I'm sure, are there. But more so, the emotional journey is the same as it was back then, to a large extent. It's not about a king being deposed or having his head cut off for some abstract reason due to court dynamics. It's they can't have a child, and they're having multiple miscarriages, and it's really affecting their relationship. And again, if you take out the setting of it being in a kingdom in the 1500s and being historical figures, then that could apply to many people's situation. And I think again, it's a topic like miscarriages and the death of a child. People deal with these things very privately, and we often don't know people who we might have people in our lives who've been touched by these things. I know I certainly have, that I didn't know previously, have been touched by it. So it's certainly not a resolved area, and it's hard to know how to interact with those circumstances emotionally even now. So it was really helpful, I think, in the show to be dealing with those circumstances.
And just finally, I mean, obviously you've had the great success with the show, and you're doing other things. Are you enjoying what you're doing at the minute? Because I know that you've done a few movies as well that may or may not be coming out very soon. Have you enjoyed kind of the doing all these different things, going from something like Spanish Princess to something that someone else did?
Yeah, I went straight from Spanish Princess to doing the Conjuring Part 3, which is coming out like next summer. And I was playing a guy who killed someone in the 1980s and claimed it was a demon. It was such a welcome relief from wearing giant fur clothes and pretending to be a king. I've always seen actors say that they love to play different parts. They love to play different parts to the ones they played previously. And I was just like, you'd be so lucky to play any parts at all. But I really get it now, I guess probably just not wearing those giant fur coats and being either too hot or too cold all the time is a real welcome relief. Also, just clothes, they're beautiful to look at, and the costume people are amazing, but they're just not practical. Like, I'm wearing a tracksuit right now, and it's just so glorious. I don't think I've worn any formal clothes since that time. But I think I'm so lucky to be able to go from Henry VIII into another real life character who, is apparently possessed by demons and killed someone. It's I'm definitely a lucky boy for sure. It's really unimaginable almost. Think like in drama school, I'd be able to do that,
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously they've been waiting an extra year for Conjuring 3, but fans, can they get excited? Are they in for a treat when they see it?
I certainly hope they are. I haven't seen it either. It's meant to come out in September there, but I think they know exactly what they're doing, these guys in Warner Brothers. And I'm very excited to see it. Very nervous, but very excited to see it.
Awesome. Well, dude, thank you so much for your time today. Absolute pleasure chatting to you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, dude.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys.
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey